Welcome to the February 12th, 2025 meeting of the Mayor's Municipal Building Blue Ribbon Committee. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
First off, we have review and approval of the meeting minutes. Did everybody get a chance to read the minutes?
I have one question.
Yes, sir. Peter.
I think at the first meeting and then on the tour, I had made two requests and I haven't been able to find them yet. One was, can we have a listing of the money that's been spent to date on architectural, engineering, what have you, to see how much has been spent and what's left.
Okay.
Two, and I think if my memory serves me correct, Peter Rice said it was available, the adjacency plans that had been done for the police department. You know, they had some plans showing what needed to be near each other, and that was going to be included with the things that we could print up, and I haven't seen either of them.
Okay. Duly noted. Any other comments regarding the minutes?
You want to do them both at once? Yeah. I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Councilor Cook's going to take this part of the meeting?
You done already?
We're tag teaming.
Okay.
So thank you all for taking the time on the 31st to tour the building. We're going to just spend just a few minutes getting everyone's reflections on the tour to make sure that we have an opportunity to discuss those thoughts. So whoever would like to share their thoughts.
First of all, I want to thank the city manager and the police chief and the staff for hosting the tour. I found it very informative, especially with regards to the City Hall portion, because there had been social service agencies over there for so long. It was nice to see how things were set up now. One of the things that I walked away from, and this is based on some of the conversations we were having, and is that one of the thoughts is that one way to look at the police portion of it is to kind of look at the section where we have the city clerk and the tax collector and incorporate that into the police portion of it. If that is something that the group is at least interested in exploring, I think it would be beneficial for the municipal side of to look and say, okay, if we have the rest of the building less that, how can that accommodate the municipal side? You know, I'm not talking about getting in architects or et cetera, just the way that they do things anyways. They've moved offices around, so I would be interested in that portion of it, and I'd be interested in it in two different ways. One without the school department and one with the school department. So look at what I'm going to refer to as the municipal side of the building, and how can that be configured? I'm going to jump a little bit if I can. I was very impressed with the information that was provided to us last week about the earlier study. I know that we had talked about the idea of having a single point of entrance, if that's a decent term, and I'm glad to see that there's work that's already been done on that. And so I think that, there are a couple of things that come to mind, and I know I'm rambling a little bit, but, the fact is that if we do that, we need to think about the fact is, how do we make those services that people use the most accessible services. You know, there was a comment the other day about, in order to get to the tax collectors and the city clerk, which is where most people that come into the building go to, they have to walk down a hallway. Is there a way to make that more accessible so that, and I see some of the plans kind of spoke to that. And my last comment is incorporating what I'll call the lobby area of the council chambers. That room there seems to be kind of wasted space. Is there a way to incorporate that into city services? So those are my comments just off the top.
Thank you.
First of all, I thought the tour was great. It opened eyes in a number of directions. One, the whole complex has some deficiencies with HVAC, electrical, layout that needs to be addressed. Two, I think it's important to be able to come up with a plan that makes both the municipal side and the police side happy with what we wind up with. There's only going to be so many dollars that the city council is going to spend, and how does this committee make a recommendation back? And one of my other comment, and I'm glad it's on the agenda, is the feasibility of expansion into the back parking lot behind the station, which would address some of the issues the police department has.
I have to honestly say I was distressed. I thought the tour of the police station was really upsetting for me. I have lived here 25 years, and it's my first time taking a tour of the entire space. I felt that the level B in the complex should be closed off completely. It's just to see little heaters, to see rat traps, to see where lockers are. I have to tell you, honestly, I was really distressed, and I would think that it would be demoralizing for our police department to be working in this space. I would say that you have to close off level B altogether and certainly look at level 1. The rest of the building seems to be in pretty good shape. We didn't do the total bowels of the municipal building, but I felt very strongly on my opinion of the tour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. I was struck by how much the department's been making of what they have, and it looked to me like there's a lot of opportunity to be more efficient with the space. There's an awful lot of, it looks like it's been incrementally used over time, and for hallways, closets, and other things that I think there could be some consolidation. To the point about adjacencies, I don't know enough about what is essential adjacencies and what could possibly be split. Tying into that, I think the outside circulation of the building is also very important, how cruisers and other police vehicles come to the facility and how the public shouldn't come to certain parts of the facility. And I think there are ways to address that. I've got some ideas in my head, but I want to see some more mapping, survey and topo maps that Joe and Peter say we've got. I haven't seen them yet. Just my sense of looking at and having purchased buildings for clients when I was director of development, it reminded me of buildings that had been adapted over time, like the hospital, which has become a police station. And it's not inexpensive, as Peter well knows and Joe well know, to readapt something like that. But I think my sense was there is opportunity, especially if we consider possibly going out back a bit. But that ties into the outside circulation pattern that I mentioned. I think these things have to come together. And related to all of that is, are there, and I don't know this because it's a part of the adjacency thing, is there, like, could the detectives be in a separate area and still be functional and efficient? Would that even be better for them to be apart, as they sort of are now? It seemed like they had the best space of anybody, or anything else like that. So I agree there were some distressing things, but I didn't see any tremendously fatal flaws. Those are my impressions.
Thank you. Commissioner Hart?
Yeah, sure. I think, I would echo what Rick and a number of others have said. I think it's striking to see, and not just the PD, but what all of the municipal departments have made of things that are not optimal. And I think that might be a generous description.
Yeah.
I think that we have really tremendous people who work for our city. And I think that we have a job to try and create a space for all of them where they're proud to come to work. And that's a pretty daunting task. But as Rick said, I was also taken aback by how much space we have in the complex holistically. And I share his sentiment that taking a holistic approach, as you describe, and thinking about where everything needs to come together, because at the end of the day, all of these folks need to come to work every day and work together with one another. And, for instance, going out back, if that creates all sorts of issues with respect to how police officers leave the parking lot where their cruisers are stored, if you will, we don't want to create challenges for people in their day-to-day jobs. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to make their jobs easier. And so, I think that's directionally my big takeaway. The only other thing I would say is clearly some of the things like plumbing and HVAC. I mean, speaking of making do with suboptimal situations, I mean, I don't even want to know, Peter, what you've had to go through around when things need to be replaced, what that looks like. I got a glimpse of it the other day, and you've shared details in our prior sessions about this. Sounds like a disaster. So, how can we make this space and whatever incremental space we need to add, because it's clear that it's not enough space, and I completely get that, but how do we make it work for everybody? And like I said, it's clear that we have a lot of really amazing and resilient people working for the city, because they still come to work every day and there's things that are challenging just sitting at their desk. So.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman, the adjacency diagrams are on on the city's website. It's the Monday, May 20th, 2024 presentation, page 6. I think what you're asking for more so, and maybe they show the adjacency diagrams. I think what would be more helpful for everybody is understanding what adjacencies are important. The chief can better explain why it's important to have patrol next to booking. Why is it, so those types of things I think are more important than the diagrams that have been shown here. And I think what that adjacency will tell you when you say, well, let's put something out back. Well, what does that mean relative to bringing a perpetrator or discharging somebody and they have to walk through the entire building to be discharged? So those are the types of things you have to think about, and the chief can speak to that. But the diagrams that we spoke to are online, and so, but I don't think they're probably as much as you were thinking you would see, because it's not a description of this has to be here because of this. It shows the adjacencies.
Yeah.
So it was a labeling thing, because I looked for adjacencies and I didn't realize it was inside a presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were clear that it was going to be posted as part of that.
Well, yeah, except the question, I can remember because you're always very helpful, saying that is available and we will send that out. So.
And that was the lack of clarity on my part. I should have said it was in a presentation and the presentations are being posted.
Okay.
That would have been a better description of how it was there. I apologize.
So noted.
No apologies needed.
Mr. Rice, May 20th of what year? I'm sorry.
2024.
2024.
Thank you, sir.
So, final reflections.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful if the chief just gave a brief overview about that adjacencies page? Because I think it's color-coded, right? But it doesn't really
Yeah,
give a whole lot
I
more
mean,
narrative, just
yeah.
because we're on that topic.
That would
I think it
be,
would just be easier if we actually saw it, because in the final description of the way we had everything designed, it met all
Can you
those-
speak up?
It met all those adjacencies. You know, as Peter has stated, it was like, so we had patrol, when we took our tour and you see on the first floor, patrol is on our first floor now. The booking office is there, so it gives quick access. If something were to go on there, they can get there. But it basically taking what we have now and flipping it to the front of the PD so that when we do have a prisoner, we can quickly escort him off the building without having to go through the whole interior of the police department. So in order to do that in the configuration that we have here, the latest design that we have puts all those requirements into the front of the building. Like you talk about a central point of entry for the city hall, we're doing that with the police department, with the records department, evidence, all that stuff, so that it's like one point of service. Everybody can access it from the lobby and not have to come into our police station to do all those different things.
Chief, I think it would also be really helpful if people can understand what is required to be next to each other versus what is desired. Because we saw some of that. I know not everyone has had the opportunity to tour another facility. So when we saw the Dover station, there were some things that they were able to move. It wasn't ideal, but they made it work. But then there were other things they had to have next to each other. So what absolutely
Well,
to be.
I mean, I don't think there is a has to be this way. It's all going to come down to a preference. You know, for me, my point of view is to reduce our liability and risk. You know, which, you know, in the Dover situation, they built with what they could do with the means they had. You know, in comparison to like Dover, you got to realize is they went from like 8,000 square feet to 30,000 square feet. So that was a huge improvement over what they had. You know, we're in a lot of space here. So we're not asking for much more space than what we already have, but it's just reconfigured for a better purpose.
So I've put the slide that Peter referenced up here. This is page 6 of that presentation of May. So it's hard to read, but this spells out the adjacencies by grouping.
So this would be considered a desired assemblage, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
you
so-
see booking an in here,
Yeah.
and where's our?
The Sally Port would be right there, the squares in the booking area. Like that's coming off the front
Okay, here's the-
lobby right now. Correct.
So a cruiser pulls into here, it can even be secured with a door. The prisoner comes out, and you've got patrol right here in case there's a
Correct.
an incident.
Yeah.
And
Dispatch is right there, which is routine for patrol officers when they make an arrest to have easy access to dispatch.
that's our dispatch.
That's dispatch, yep.
So there's good communication here, and then detectives actually
That's a second floor.
are on the second floor.
Right.
Where they have some quiet to work.
Correct.
And then we have, where are their interview rooms?
They would be in that somewhat off of that public access area, but then you can see record on the first floor. The records in the court are on the other side of the lobby, so it's a initial point of access, which is current in our PD right now, and things are in the back of the PD that wouldn't be open to the general public.
Are the records paper or are they?
So what, if anything, remains on the lower level, Chief? Anything? Just storage?
Nothing. The only thing that would remain in the lower level really is the range.
And the holding cells are?
There, that's the booking area.
Okay. Mr. Chung?
I have an ignorant question, but I'm proud to be ignorant of the fact I've never been arrested, and I don't want to be. How does it work? If you bring somebody into the Sally Port, they're a prisoner, and you book them, is it typical that they go through a process and then they leave, or
The majority of the time they leave.
so they would just on their own recognizance just walk out the door and go wherever or get picked up?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's the person you don't want traversing through the station or needing to be escorted.
Correct,
assuming
but
that-
sometimes it's like someone can walk into a lobby and say, I have a warrant, and then we have to walk them through the PD to get them into the booking officer.
Would that be another officer from a different department, or?
No, that could just be someone who.
Oh, a warrant to
Turning
be
themselves
arrested.
in.
Right,
Turning themselves
turning
in.
themselves
Okay.
in, correct. Yeah.
And Chief, would you clarify for people, how long do we hold individuals, and how frequently do we hold individuals?
Well, we try not to hold anybody overnight. We take them to the county jail. So we're here processing them, depending on the circumstances, the time of day at night. If it's a busy weekend night, we may arrest someone and not be able to get them to county jail for 4 or 5 hours. So we have to place them in a cell. But we're no longer consider ourselves a holding facility where we keep people. If someone gets arrested on Monday, doesn't go to court till Monday. We used to hold them for the whole weekend, but now we try to transport as many people to the jail as we can.
Go ahead. Does that have anything to do with insurance? Why is it that you only have them for 4 or 5 hours, and what happens?
Well, we're an accredited police department, and do that, you have to meet certain criteria. And to be a holding facility has a whole bunch more criteria than we want to have to do.
Right.
So therefore, we don't call ourselves a holding facility any longer. We're a temporary holding facility, but we have the capability. If we had to hold somebody, we can, but we don't. We prefer not
Prefer
to.
not to. Okay.
Do you have any reflections, Councilor Tabor, on the tour before we move on?
Thanks for asking. I have always shared Mary Lou's concern about the basement level, and the iterations that we've done out of the working group did not, as the chief says, have our detectives or locker rooms downstairs necessarily. Just the shooting range and the well, that's about it, really.
Weight room.
Yeah. In an ideal world, we could do that.
Storage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My other reflection of the whole building is we have a lot of space where we don't need it and not enough where we do need it. Because it was a hospital, so you get up on the 3rd floor, the halls are wide, the rooms are big, so the head count in those are small. Meanwhile, we've got the PD, downstairs in patrol and detectives in bullpens with maybe, 100 square feet per person or something. Those are my 2 major impressions.
Okay. I'll share mine, and then we can move on. I think I am probably an outlier when it comes to the current facility. Maybe it's because I spent most of my years working for the federal government or for nonprofit organizations where we didn't have a lot of money to spend on facilities. So I don't see as many deficiencies as everyone else seems to see in the building. In fact, I think it's the renovations that have been done very well, and I appreciate our facilities and DPW staff for working so hard to spend our money very wisely, because I think those improvements have been remarkable since the first time that I saw the facility. I do think that we have major issues with HVAC. That's really clear to me. It's also clear that we need to work on electrical upgrades because we just can't have the communication systems that we need and the networking capabilities that we need without major changes in those systems. One of the things that is also very, very clear to me is that we haven't done as many needed improvements on the municipal side that we need to do. And the point of access is not really clear for residents when they're coming in the building. So I can see where those improvements definitely need to take place. I can see where we can move people around in the building and use the building much more efficiently, and where we could consider an addition on the back of the building that maybe even retains parking if you do an addition that's supported by pillars in the same way that we had discussed doing that on the side of the building before. So you can retain parking and even get some additional covered parking in the back of the facility for the police department. So I think that was helpful in seeing the back parking area and how we could update that. Also, I would say that I really appreciated, and this is a nice segue into the next part of the discussion, seeing the studies from 2015 and seeing where we've landed as far as square footage, because those studies basically said we have the square footage we need, even given what we are estimating that we need. So I think that that's really helpful. That tells me that we have the room here to make the accommodations we need to make without too much external building on the site, except for specialized services where we cannot accommodate those specialized services within the current building footprint. So that's where I'm thinking.
Kate, when you make those comments, are you looking at level B and closing that off altogether? Because I don't think it's accommodating the women who are working for our police. And so, you know, I know that we're down 6 officers. We have 7 women on the force. But from what we have now, I would really say close off that entire level B and somehow accommodate everything on other floors.
Right. And so my comments are based upon, I saw the building a few years ago before we renovated those spaces. So before we renovated those spaces, they were really deficient. They are much improved, is what I'm saying, from where we were a few years ago. Because a few years ago, I wouldn't have wanted to use the locker room at all. I wouldn't have wanted to go into the women's locker room space. I mean, they were very deficient. So what I'm saying is that we've done a very good job at using the funds that we've had over the last few years to make improvements. I'm not saying that it's adequate. I'm saying that they're improved from where we were.
Right.
And I actually would like to see, before we start planning for, you know, we have goals around hiring and where we're going to be in 20 years, I want to see what the feasibility is of getting there as well. So how are we doing in diversifying the force? So we can plan for a certain number of women on the force, which I would like to see. But if we don't think realistically we can get there, we shouldn't be over planning for that either. So we have to be
Which
really
comes
realistic.
first, the chicken or the egg?
We have to be very realistic about where we can get and where we can't get. And so what I'm saying is that we can, I think, reutilize other spaces in the building to improve space. And maybe I wouldn't abandon the bottom part of the building altogether. We have other uses we can use that for. And so, and we have a lot of other parts of City Hall that maybe would benefit from having use of those spaces that we haven't discussed yet. You know, we have a lot of record storage. We have a lot, so we have to be talking about usage of all the space in the building.
Okay, one of the things that's going to come up, and it was in one of the reports that early on we were sent, and this will be something for the chief, that the police department requires 162 parking spaces. For what?
I don't know where the 162 number came in, other than it was.
Well, it came in one of the reports in here.
It was an early on report, I think, from 2016.
You know, I think
It's a planning estimate based on those reports that I read. If you have a certain number of square feet, it's a rough number. I wouldn't hold it to be.
Well, I guess my question is, what are the actual number going to be as we plan? Is there an addition on the back, or not using the parking spaces the outside of the entrance now? What's the total number that's going to be? Somebody wrote a large number in a report. If that's not true, let's find out what the true number is.
And I think that that's really important as we move forward. Everything we do is we should be based on where we think we're actually going to end up in a few years, and they've been doing a lot of that planning for the future. So we do have some of that analysis already, but I think the 162 spaces came in a much earlier study. So,
Peter?
And I think the nature of parking is you first have to figure out how big a space you have for the building, and then what residual parking is left. And, you know, based on that, is it adequate, you know, based on, you know, design criteria. You know, the architects will tell you X, you know, square feet, you need X number of spaces, you need X number of people for employees, visitors, et cetera. And then the way we manage our fleet has impact in terms of the number of spaces needed as well. So, you know, that was a planning tool to say, you know, in a perfect world, if we were in a green space, this is what we'd expect. Given the space available, there is no true number in the sense that, you know, we figure out what we can get and can we live with it.
Okay.
I want to make sure we hear from Commissioner Coyle, who has come in about her tour of the building, because that's what we're making reflections on our building tours, so.
Right. I mean, I didn't go on the tour because I was in court that day, but with respect to, I mean, I think my experience generally of the police station is that there are huge deficiencies throughout, and particularly in terms of the condition of the building as well as adjacencies, or lack thereof, I should say. I mean, it is extraordinarily problematic walking, you know, arrestees through the building. You know, as a prosecutor and a lawyer and working in a lot of police stations, I go to police stations every single day. I can tell you that the Portsmouth Police Facility is woefully inadequate in terms of how you want to do modern day policing. And I don't think that probably comes as any surprise to anyone in this room at this current time. And so, I mean, that essentially, I mean, we're here to try to make those, because, you know, Portsmouth is at the forefront of many things in terms of community policing and where we're going in the future. And yet we're in the, you know, stone age of police facilities. And I can speak to that really, I mean, in terms of many aspects, but that would be generally my belief.
Thank you. Thank you. And
A couple
Larry.
of just quick comments, you know, to speak to what Rick was talking about as far as spatial and offices. I mean, at the end of the day, I was here when we moved in, and you got one hospital room or two hospital rooms. I mean, it wasn't based on what you needed. It was just, we didn't have to move walls, so that's what they ended up doing. And then secondly, when you start talking about where we're coming from and improvements, I mean, let's face it, when this police station was on Penhallow Street, you had a men's room on the first floor and a woman's room on the third floor. So let's not go back too far to say, well, it's better than it was then, because we can go way back. And, you know, as the chief is saying, when we moved here, this was wonderful compared to what they had, just as in Dover's case, moving from 8,000 to where they are now was. But that doesn't take us where we need to go. And where we need to go, as the commissioner's mentioning, is that, you know, we need to have a facility, and I think I'm hearing this all around the table, where the police department can work effectively, efficiently, and the municipal side can work effectively and efficiently. And so we need to move forward and not necessarily, you know, get stuck on the fact is, well, you know, this is what we've got, we need to live with it, because I don't think we're there, so.
okay. Ms. Plummer, do you want to share any thoughts? And I think we need to make sure you have a tour if
Right.
you have not had a
Right.
tour. Okay.
It's not fair for me to say anything.
Okay, so we will make sure that you have that opportunity.
Thank you.
I don't want to
Chairman.
hold things up, but to your point, and I don't even know if this is possible, I know some of you have toured other police stations. Would it make sense for some of us to look at, is there a good city police station that would be an example to, and if we could even get permission to do it?
Different.
Yes, we can get tours. We could tour several different facilities, just a matter of how many you want to go see.
It would be appropriate to do it as a group
As a
and not
group,
as a one-off. And
Yes.
So we can definitely work on that. I think Councilor Tabor and I can work on working with the city to schedule some things, and with Chief McCourt to schedule some things.
Yes, I think you'd already started some calls to Dover, right,
Yeah.
Chief? So that's underway. But
Yeah. Whenever we discuss, I saw the Dover chief yesterday, so whenever we can arrange it.
Will you have lunch for us?
At Dover, I doubt it.
I'm going to turn it over to you for.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking time. It was a long tour, and I appreciate that you all stuck with it right to the very end, so thank you. The next part we wanted to talk about, we put this on the agenda, the 2015 LaValle Brenzinger study, which I hope, has everybody had a chance to read that? It's a story in two parts. There's some slides, but we also surfaced, and I asked that we add this to the packet, the contemporaneous notes of the city and the city council discussion at a retreat. So you get the whole narrative there, and you get the discussion with lots of former councilors' names that we recognize. And the way I would frame our next part of this discussion is that a good starting point? And I'll just identify some of the things that discussion surfaced. First of all, a projection of the future space needs of all the municipal departments, including the police, versus the square footage we have in bricks and mortar. Conclusion, there's adequate space, at least for a 10-year horizon. And then a cost comparison of moving the police department completely off the hill. And it was substantially more expensive to do that. Also, a brief exploration of selling this building and starting fresh, and that gets into really big numbers. So staying in place is cheaper than moving, was the initial conclusion. The second was the idea of taking the wing that currently has the tax assessor and the city clerk and turning that over to the police department. And concurrent with that, moving those customer-facing departments, city clerk, tax assessor, over to the Seabold wing, and you have a central point of service, which is one of the things the mayor has asked us to explore. Two other things. The police department in this discussion comes up out of the ground level. And we've talked about that a lot today. And lastly, there's a new Sally Port. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term Sally Port, that's where a cruiser comes in and the prisoner comes out. But those 5 elements.
We're not familiar with it personally, so.
Thank goodness. There were some nights I... Those 5 elements come out of the discussion, but I thought we'd get your comments and thoughts on it. And it, it's already sparked the follow-on question of, if we had to expand in the back, could we do that?
My first comment, when I spoke before, I thought it was extremely well done, and I think it's a great starting place. I mean, we've talked about the fact, or at least we talked about it at the first meeting, about we need a place to start, and the start is not necessarily bringing in and hiring a firm to come in. What can we do ourselves? And I think this is a good start, and I think we should go from there. So.
Yes, Ms. Plummer.
John, can I please explain to me what you mean by having a firm? What kind of firm?
Well, we had, at some point in time, when you're doing a building, you know better than I do, you need to have an architect and someone to come in and do your costing and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And we're not there yet.
Got it.
So what can we do to move the process along without engaging in spending?
Right.
Party,
Yeah.
technical resources.
Right. Yeah.
That's where AI comes in.
That's right. Rick?
Well, in that regard, I know people saw issues with HVAC and things like that. I think for this group and our levels of expertise, maybe just looking at general space planning and adjacencies, that's where we should focus. And then after it's all done, Peter can say, it can't be done because the HVAC doesn't work or whatever. But,
Or there's a column and we can't move it.
right. I think trying to get the spatial issues figured out if they can be, because what we're being told and what John just said is, in theory, there's enough space. So in theory, if the jigsaw puzzle is put together properly, maybe it can be done in a better fashion. Let's try to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary Lou, you hit your head.
Yes, in reading the report aspect of the information that was passed along to us, that was 9 years ago, and it was an 8-year projection. In quote, it said, we need to get out of the lower level. There was a need for 4 acres, and at the retreat in 2016, the total number of square feet needed was 117,000. And they said that at that time, the building had 118,000 square feet. So I was getting information from the retreat, but I'm also saying that it was 9 years ago with an 8-year projection, and we're certainly looking much longer than an 8-year period.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, given that Peter was here at that time, and I was thinking about putting Peter on the spot from a macro level and saying, fast forward 9 years, how much of this evaluation still is relevant? How do the projections play out? And for folks here and following along, we're undergoing a staffing needs assessment for the police department as well that we will have in a couple of months' time. So, but giving Peter a moment to be put on the spot, since Peter was here and helped commission this first study, I thought it'd be relevant to hear what he thinks of it today.
So one of the things I'd like to point out there, and it's shown in the March 8th, 2016 phasing and costs benchmarking, was that there was envisioned a 10,000 square foot addition to that proposal, that it wasn't, the existing building could not handle all the needs without doing some additional space. The costing did project out to, I believe, 20 something, I can't remember off the top of my head.
26.
And the intent was to look at, it was 2024, I believe. So we looked at a mid-year construction, and the numbers seem to be holding okay. That's how the $42.2 million number came about originally. So from that perspective, I think we're, the numbers are still, it was forward-thinking enough to say, okay, we knew it wasn't going to be immediately constructed. Let's look and project it out. The challenges with that, the last couple of years, since we started this exercise, construction costs have gone through the roof. And I don't think that's going to reverse in the near term.
All the building materials in the country are going to be going to California.
Yeah, most likely.
Yeah, and the cost of those materials are going to be
Oh, yeah.
much higher. There's no reason to think that they won't be.
As the counselor said, the manager said, we are doing a facilities staffing needs assessment, which will confirm the square footage need. And, we've been working with the consultant on that pretty diligently, and it seems to be making good progress. So I feel like the information is there, and, I would caution people that, just saying, well, let's do this here, and you can do this, move this. Oftentimes those ideas are great on paper, or they look nice and it's a great idea. However, there's construction reasons that escalate costs significantly. We did look out back, and I was just going to say to Joe that we should pull out some of those versions that we had looked at and determine that the costs associated with that and the challenges related to adjacencies are real. And if we think of a long-term vision and a long-term investment for the community, this is a 50, 100-year investment. So, yes, it's a lot of money, but we're making an investment in the long-term operation of the police force. So I think we shouldn't quibble about, a little bit piecey. I would encourage folks to just focus on functionality and a facility that we're proud of, and that the police get a lot of function out of.
Counselor?
In any of the studies where we looked at back, did we look at taking the entire second floor as well, or were those additions just?
We did.
Okay.
And if I may,
Yes,
I
Commissioner.
feel that, although it's great looking at this 2015 study, we have updated, we've looked at the back, the front, the, different variations with the working group. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't evaluate I mean, the working group spent a lot of time ferreting out these issues, and why we ended up in the front was tied to cost, adjacencies, and looking at the big picture. And so I think we, without incurring cost, if we spent a little time in a review of some of those things, and, fortunately, we have great resources in Peter and Joe, who worked, so closely, I mean, everyone here, of course, but they have a lot of experience building, a lot of experience understanding the relationships of mechanical systems, and why and has spent a lot of time with the police department and the chief in understanding those adjacencies. So it might be valuable to lean on them for their expertise in evaluating how we came to the conclusions in the rounds.
Peter?
Can we get, I don't want to talk through John's head. Can we get, you just mentioned the material that you had. It doesn't do you any good to have it if we don't have it.
Agreed.
Agreed, yeah.
And
so.
that's kind of my point, which is like, it would be
Well,
valuable.
then get it to us.
Okay.
I mean, we started meeting 3-4 weeks ago, and now to find out, well, there's information that you don't have. Well, let's get everything on the table.
Well, let's be fair. The first meeting was an organizational meeting, then we went on a tour. This is the first real meeting.
Yeah, so we're uncovering what we need. Cameron?
I just want to close the loop on what Peter was getting at. So this initial report suggested there was sufficient space. 2016, we said we needed net plus 10. And that 2016 study, I'm just trying to parse specifically exactly where we landed at, suggested that net plus 10 was sufficient to support whatever amount of space, resourcing growth for some period of time.
Correct.
And do we have any construct around what that period of time was? Is that a 20-year window?
Window? Right, Joe, do you remember?
And I'm not asking you to...
You'd have to clarify which study specifically that you're referring to. So
Well, the one that produced the $42.2 million number.
Done when?
2016. This one here.
16,
Oh, the
yeah.
2016.
This
yeah,
one here,
yeah,
the phase
yeah.
build out, which
2016.
I think that was a 10-year window.
Yeah.
So that net plus 10 would support the needs of the city from 2016 to 2026? If that...
2024.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm trying to parse here is, what are we saying?
It's important.
specifically?
It's important when you. Yeah, it's really important when you look at the current space needs, though, that the police have actually asked for, is very similar in similar square footage. It's just about reorganizing that and getting it where it needs to be. So they're not asking for any more square footage than that study had for the police department. In fact, they're asking for a little bit less right now. But I don't know that we've looked at municipal need as well. So there might be a different need for the municipal space than we had then.
Yeah, I'm
So-
just, I guess what I'm trying to understand is there were studies done that produced some requirement of square footage,
Yeah.
both for the PD and then in totality. So what I'm trying to drill, sorry,
So
go ahead,
if
Peter.
I could
Yeah,
just,
please.
sorry to interrupt.
No.
What's posted online is a summary of municipal and PD requirements, and it's,
This one.
page by page, I believe so, and it's got,
Yeah.
each page, it's got the square footage,
Yep.
and,
Okay.
and so that was the title of it. Is that the title? What's the title?
Portsmouth Municipal Complex Strategies for Programmatic and Physical Plan Improvements to Better Serve the Public.
Portsmouth City Hall Programmatic Needs Evaluation
Okay.
is what I'm looking at.
Okay, perfect. I'll pull that up. But
Yeah, that-
so, yeah, I guess directionally, really, what I'm trying to solve for is,
March 2016, I believe it's,
Yes.
go down.
Finish up, Cameron.
yeah, just if we can get to very specifically what the number is in terms of square feet required, then we know what square footage we have. We can make determinations around what parts of the building we're going to condemn, or if we're going to condemn them at all, and that yields some level of outcome in terms of a knowledge base that we can use to think about what needs to be incremental. Because I guess, and I keep going back to this, and I know we talked about it on the tour, and I know we talked about it in the first meeting. Without that foundational knowledge and it being crystal clear and some understanding of what that means for how many future years, we're having circular conversations and we're not going anywhere. We're just speculating about the future without the proper facts. So,
So I would assume that our staffing study for the police will have a future projection, right? Long range.
That's the point, yep.
That's,
stupendous.
yeah, and
For staffing, not for square footage necessarily.
Chairs, I give a 5-minute warning, and then the meeting will end, so just
Got it.
be
Okay.
mindful.
And can I just say, what I was trying to do is commend the police, because that study had them at 66,000 square feet, and I think that's where we started initially. They've worked really, really hard for the last year, and they've gotten that down even further. So
9, right?
So they've done an
39?
No,
Yeah,
we're at
49. So they've
we're
done
like-
an impressive job to
49.
adjust their
49, yeah.
what their needs,
That's what we've got.
what their projected needs are.
Switched out.
But I don't.
I mean,
don't
net
think
minus
we've done
20%
that.
is very substantial.
It's very
yes.
substantial, and they've done a lot of work to get there. So, but I don't think we've done that same work, is what I'm saying on the
Right.
municipal
I'm
side
trying-
to
yeah.
reevaluate what needs are. So,
Right. So Rick, go ahead, and then I just want to
Just
wrap up on
following
this.
up on what Councilor Cook just said, maybe you've already done this, I suspect you have, but all studies are based on assumptions and premises that begin those studies. Did you look at the assumptions that were made in 2016 and decide that they were perhaps a little bit high, and that's how you came up with a lower number currently, or have you done that?
I mean, we looked at it, and it was basically at the directive of the council. It was like, we got to get within this budget number, and we couldn't do it with the space that we originally had. So we went back at it, and we looked at where can we cut space, and we went through it and got it to where we got it. And some of it was not by preference, but by requirement, necessity. Yeah.
And that 49,000 square foot number, was that broken down? I just haven't looked at it.
Yes.
In great
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing.
It is.
That this older study has a lot of value and maybe is a sensible starting point. I think, Cameron, your point is we got to know the space needs with great clarity, and then look at how the
You
pieces
can't
get-
allocate space and do the jigsaw puzzle, whatever you want to call it, Tetris. That exercise is not able to be started until you understand the requirement.
Just please know that huge efforts have gone into that. It has not been a willy-nilly process.
I
just don't want anyone to think that we
No.
were just throwing darts at the
No,
dark.
I don't think that
These
darts were
these
thrown
were
at the
calculations.
Yeah, I don't think that darts were thrown at the
Got to
board.
wrap things up,
Sorry,
everybody.
And then those were gone over many, many times. Okay, so I think the question that begs is, if we looked at taking that wing that has a city clerk and so forth and making that police station, what possible layouts fall out of that with the 49,000 square foot amount needed for the police fit, and would the adjacencies work? Right? Those are the questions that we have posed out of this. But thank you all for reading that and reviewing it. There was some good thinking done there in the past. Last thought, Greek mythology, the Procrustean bed. Procrustes had a bed of a fixed length, and if you were too long, he'd chop your legs off. We don't want to get stuck on 117,000 square feet as a Procrustean bed. If we need another 10 or 20,000, we should, to do the job, we should figure out
completely agree.
how to do it.
So our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, the 26th of February, 3 p.m., this room.
Okay,
And-
one last item.
You got 30 seconds.
You have the green buildings policy for the city. We will be discussing it at our next meeting. We're sharing it with you now so that you can look at it. It's a way that we could potentially save money by doing improvements like windows, and
Perfect.
so we need to be thinking that way.
Is the working group information online already?
It will be. Do you want to get a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Whatever.